The following is an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.
Welcome to Island Justice with Roger Batchelor. This week we have Richard Routledge and Pam Rudy, both from the BC Families in Transition organization. Perhaps, Richard, you could just tell us a little bit about what BC Families in Transition is and what you do.
Thank you. It is a very unique nonprofit organization. We've been around 33 years and have grown a lot over those years. We actually have three major departments. We have a public education department, a legal support services department, and a diverse counseling department, all together under one roof. And together, we serve over 10,000 people a year of all ages, adults, children, couples, families, you name it, through all kinds of family conflict, whether they're staying together and working through things or separating and trying to make things work as amicably as possible.
Now, I understand you're the executive director?
That's right.
And could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to be executive director?
Yeah, thanks. I've been in the counseling field for 26 years now. People always say I look too young, which is a great compliment. I got into it very early, working with kids, and then worked with adolescents, and then worked with adults in a number of different ways. And these days, I still do a lot of work in that field. I work with a lot of couples and families and kids outside of BC Families in Transition, and I'm very fortunate to be full-time executive director there, going on 6 years now.
Okay. And Pam, you're a legal advocate, and I know that because I see you at the courthouse.
Yes.
Could you tell us what your role is as legal advocate?
Certainly. We do a lot of one-on-one connections with people there that are waiting for their court matter to be on Thursday mornings, and that's usually first appearances where people think they're coming and they're only one there, but it turns out there's a whole crowd of people and they don't know what's going on. So we try to get them to talk to duty counsel if they don't have their own lawyer. That's probably the biggest role that we have, connecting unrepresented people with duty counsel. But there's a lot else that we do in terms of general information about court protocol, who's in there, what to expect, help direct them to where they can get the date for the next step if they're going to a trial date or a family case conference. So it's and a lot of emotional support, as you can imagine. It's a pretty difficult place emotionally for people to be waiting if they're facing with someone who they either don't like very much or have had conflicts with.
Mm-hmm. Now, Richard, Families in Transition, it's an interesting title.
Yes.
What's your mandate and how do you meet it?
It's quite broad now. We used to be the Separation and Divorce Resource Center, and many people remember us by that name. What happened was we brought in a counseling team a few years ago. It was when we were still Separation and Divorce Resource Center, and people would come to us for separation counseling, and miraculously people would sometimes say, well, now that we're getting counseling, why don't we stay together and work through things? And I had staff coming to me saying, Richard, you're always saying stay within the mandate of separation and divorce, the end game, and here these people want to stay together. Can we work with them? So we thought, what a wonderful thing. Let's go back to our old 1978 mission and vision statement, update it, expand our legal mandate so we can keep people together too, if that's what they want to do. So we thought, well, families these days, what we call a family is changing. A family now covers many, many different kinds of people, and living together in various different ways and not living together in various different ways. So that's in transition. We're not just about the end point anymore, we're about changes and how people work together even after they separate as a different kind of a family. And we're also looking at how people are working through change no matter why they come to us. So transition seemed to be a major focus, and we thought that name really encompasses much better what our role is today. So now we work with people to stay together as much as we do to help them separate.
Now, if someone's interested in accessing your resources, how would they go about doing that?
Just call us. It's as simple as that. We get referrals from about 50 other organizations in Greater Victoria and from elsewhere in the mainland and even other parts of Canada and other countries, believe it or not, because they find us on the web. But most of our services are for people who come from Greater Victoria or surrounding areas. Just call us. phone 250-386-4331 or email www.bcfit.org. And actually, I got that wrong. It's info@bcfit.org. And we will help you from there.
Okay. Now, Pam, I know that there's much more that you do as a legal advocate besides the work outside of the courtroom 201 during the Thursday first appearance dates. What is that?
Well, we provide people with one-on-one appointments in the office, and that can be a way of exploring what their options are. Sometimes it's before they've separated, but people may not be sure that their relationship is going to be able to stay intact. So if they have children, or if they have property, or if there are financial concerns, sometimes they just want to get a bit of help doing some legal research, is what I and the other advocates tend to use to describe that aspect. And as we're providing a bit of education, it's a matter of helping people understand, what basic rights and responsibilities are involved in family law issues to do with children, so custody, guardianship, talk about access, talk about how child support is calculated, and a bit about property and child and spousal support as well. And we also provide information about terms that people may not be familiar with. A lot of people are familiar with US-based court drama and may not have any idea about how mediation may apply to dealing with family law matters, or they may not know about collaborative family law process. So those are other things that we can try and give people a heads up on. And then they're hopefully in a better position to make informed choices about how they can proceed.
So I would imagine that your caseload has increased since the cuts to legal aid?
Yes, definitely.
And so what do you say to the unrepresented person who doesn't have legal aid? How can you help them?
Well, it's not that we always can. I think what we're there to do is certainly listen and be there so that if they feel that they're not being addressed or heard, then at least they have an opportunity for that to be clear. We can help them prepare to see a lawyer, and there are ways people can meet with lawyers on a free consultation basis, and we know how people can access that, and so it's another resource that can be, if people call our office and come for an interview, we'll be able to give them that linkage.
I should add that we also have a toll-free legal information hotline or information line. So this is a toll-free information line throughout BC, and it's 1-877-386-4333. That is in English and French. And so people can phone us and get a lot of information just over the phone.
Really? So, and you serve areas outside of Victoria then?
We do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, as a legal advocate and working in conjunction with other advocates across BC, there are communities where there are fewer lawyers, and it's pretty common for there to be conflict of interest situations.
Mm-hmm.
So one party may have contacted the 3 lawyers in the community, so the other spouse doesn't get a chance to talk to one. But calling the legal information hotline can be a way of helping them access other ways that they can get legal answers to their questions.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you draw your client base outside of Victoria? Do you have an office outside of Victoria?
No,
or?
they just find us from far and wide. Basically, it's mostly word of mouth, really. We've been around for long enough. Pam has been with the organization for most of our history, over 23 years. And that's so we've had the legal support services to offer for a long, long time. And people hear about us. As we connect with more organizations of Greater Victoria, they also refer for clients of their own. But basically, it's word of mouth. We do very little advertising.
So I'm interested, Richard, what you were saying about people accessing your resources differently than they have in the past. And earlier on we were talking about, before we came on the show, you were telling me about how people are actually accessing counseling before they get themselves into trouble. Can you tell us more about that?
To me, that's a very important fact, that people watch a show like this one and often come away with a very dark view of what's happening to families these days. There's a lot of doom and gloom about why is divorce such a prominent feature of our society, why are so many people breaking up, what's happening to kids. Another fact, that's true, but equally true is that more and more people are coming for counseling early before they get into really serious trouble, so they can fix things early on and make them work. Personally, I see a lot of people who are coming not only for pre-marriage counseling, but pre-engagement counseling. Right away when they get together, they realize, often people realize, I've had problems in past relationships. Maybe I can learn from that and get it right in this one. We're having some conflict, let's learn through it early, make things work, think things through ahead of time for the benefit of themselves and their children, even before they have children sometimes. And I find that very heartwarming, and it's, to me, equally important as the fact that families are often separating.
Right.
It balances the picture for what's happening in our society today.
And what about people who are planning ahead of time in case of a separation? So someone who's coming to find out what they can do to protect their property or protect their children.
That's a question for Pam.
I think it really does help to have people understand a bit of basic things to do with family law and a concept that about best interests of children, and that's a pretty important concept about how decisions are made. And people tend to want to make decisions on what their moral views are of justice versus what family law may say in their case. So if we can challenge some of the assumptions, if we can help them understand that it's about focusing on children's rights, not parents' rights, that it's really the children that have the rights, that they can make more use, I think, of non-adversarial options, then they're more likely to talk the language of focusing on the children's needs first and use mediation more effectively, for example.
Okay. And how would, excuse me, how would you help get someone connected to a mediator then?
We try to identify the different ways that people can get mediation. There's a type of mediation through the Family Justice Center, which is a Ministry of Attorney General service, and we can provide them with the contact number and brochure information. Another resource is through private mediators, and we direct people to the Mediation BC website. We can also direct them to Dispute Resolution Center, which can be a resource, and then lawyer mediators. So depending on what kind of situations they may be working with, if it's complicated property, then a private mediator may not have the skill or knowledge base to address fully the kinds of complicated property issues that may come up, although they may be good at just dealing with the skills of interacting or helping the parties interact, rather. Other ways of getting people in touch with mediation, I think having them do some of the research and look up profiles. The Collaborative Family and Law Group website has good profiles of different lawyers that have done mediation and collaborative. So people can essentially interview or seek out the best resource that seems to fit for their family and the kind of way they want to work through the legal issues.
Okay. I think it's important to point out that we have a nonpartisan role, as I call it, to inform people about the broad spectrum of legal services that's available. Without taking sides and having favorites. We're not more closely attached to mediation than collaborative family law or vice versa, for example. All aspects of that broad spectrum of legal services are there for a reason, and what fits one family may not fit another. So we provide information about the whole range and help people to choose what's going to work best for them.
And by giving choice, we're not giving people exact names. It's a big question, who would be a good lawyer to go to? Who would you recommend as a mediator? We can't name individual names. We tell people, here's how you can ask certain questions to get at the information that will help you decide. Read about how the person that you're wanting to check out, what their background is, what their interests are, interview them, that because we can hear negative things about lots of people, but that doesn't mean that would be a bad resource for them personally. We hear the disgruntled aspects of people's cases, and they may tend to want to blame whoever, whether it's a judge or counselor or mediator. But if they're unhappy with the outcome, is it because it's the practitioner's fault or just general unhappiness with the situation?
Okay.
So it's unsafe to name names.
Right.
Okay, we're just going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes.
You're watching an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.
Welcome back to Island Justice with Roger Batchelor. Today we have Richard Routledge, who's the Executive Director at BC Families in Transition. And we also have Pam Rudy, who's the Legal Advocate for BC Families in Transition.
Actually one of 5 legal advocates.
And that's the next question. So tell us who's there, who works there, and what do they do?
Well, as Richard mentioned, I'm not the only legal advocate. We do have 4 other people that are part-time, but overall that adds up to providing many more opportunities to meet with people and provide services that I alone could not do for that many people every year.
And who else is there?
Go ahead.
One of the advocates does the legal information hotline, so that's important to know. The staff is diverse in that we've got many different counselors. Some are staff counselors, but a lot are contractors. So that allows more service for people, sometimes in the evenings as well as daytime hours. And occasionally we've had Saturday opportunities for appointments too.
So if we're talking about the agency as a whole, the team is now over 50 people, which is amazing.
Wow.
So if you think about it, we have over 50 people covering 3 different departments working closely together under very complex circumstances to work with people in their darkest hour. And we do it amazingly well. And I think what's really important, from my perspective, what's really important is not that we do so much or that we do is so unique and valued, but it's the way we do it that really sets us apart, in my view, that every single person who provides these services will do whatever it takes, basically, to make sure we give the very highest quality we can. And it doesn't matter whether that means extra hours or we have to take a long time to figure out what that will involve. Everybody will do it. And that, to me, it's the extras that people put into it that really make us who we are.
So, Pam said there's 5 legal advocates.
Yeah.
So who else works there?
Well, there are at any one time, about 25 different counselors, 30 counselors there, which is amazing. We also have a first response services team, which is people who work in the front end of the office who essentially take calls from people who are in an urgent situation and don't know where to go. So we get drop-ins or phone calls from people saying, I don't know what I need, I just know that I'm in great distress, my family is ailing, I don't know what to do, I'm in shock, or this has happened, I don't know what I need, where do I go? And so our front end team takes about as many calls as the need crisis line, and we'll take a lot of time to piece apart the different parts of that picture and make referrals to other organizations, figure out who the best people in the team would be to match with those family members, what complications might arise, what permission we need to get if there are kids coming in for counseling, for example, what legal issues there might be that we run into. Figure that out as much as we can before we start to make sure it's going to work. Because it's very important that if people come into our center, it's going to work once they get here.
What I appreciate is that the first response can identify if the person's pressing need is more of counseling related or legal information. It's usually the case people need both, but it's a matter of making some kind of an assessment at that first call as to what they could connect them up with first. And so that really helps by the time they come in for the appointment.
So we call that first response services because it's sort of like a triage team in a hospital. Patient comes in, okay, what's going on, what do we need, who do we contact, what procedures do we have to line up, those sorts of things. So that's essentially a program in its own right. We also have a program called Parenting After Separation, which is very widely known, and many people are referred by the Family Justice Center to attend that against their will, and still people come out of that, 90% of the evaluations are saying, this is great, wish it could have been longer. This is so helpful to get a bird's eye view of how the legal process works and the options available, and to get some really practical ideas about how to co-parent in the interest of our children first.
That's interesting, because in some jurisdictions that program is actually mandatory.
It is, actually. It is for us too, and in Victoria, but there are many people who come to it voluntarily.
Oh, I see.
Which is great. You know, people may, just for example, in the work that I do outside of the center, I see sometimes families who are not on the same page at all in the way they're orienting themselves to a conflict, and I will say, well, why do you take this program first and get a common language about what co-parenting means, and to get a different perspective from the point of view of your kids, and then come back with that common language and we'll work from there, and actually works quite well. So that is a very valuable program for people who basically need to get some practical ideas about how to go through a separation or how to adjust to a separation when there are kids involved and make it work where the kids are the most important priority. So that's one of our programs. Counseling is diverse. We have child counseling with specialists who provide various different kinds of child-focused modalities of counseling that kids can work with. They don't usually talk the way adults do. So there is expressive arts therapy, for example, and music therapy for kids. We've got a wide range of couples counseling and adult counseling, teen counseling, you name it. Group programs, a lot of different group programs like Caught in the Middle. It's amazing. We've got about, I think, 14 programs all connected together with people who communicate among themselves to make sure that they're all connected for people when they come in through our door. Mm-hmm. And we make sure it works.
I think one of the group or the counseling programs that's really been helpful is having step-family counseling.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because so many families are not the original couple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one may have come from having brought children into a new relationship, or their partner may have, or they may have each children from previous mm-hmm. relationships, and then they have other children that are their own. So that their needs in terms of counseling, I think, are somewhat different, and so we can accommodate that. We also work with grandparents. Mm-hmm. There's thousands of grandparents that are raising children,
yes.
dealing with either children from protection situations of the past, or just through separation divorce, and so we're available to them as well.
Also, there are many grandparents who feel alienated because they want to be involved and they feel excluded from what's happening in their family, and they go through their own pain. It's very different. So families in pain is really what we deal with. It's pretty impressive. It's a real privilege to work in that environment and see the transformation for people when they come in numb or in pain to when they leave. It's
well, 3/4 of our sort of client, or all of our clients are dealing with children or have children, and so a significant amount of time is spent in helping people deal with counseling issues for themselves so they can be better parents to their children, but also helping them understand if they are separated, then how are they going to be able to still parent well for the sake of the kids. Yeah.
This all sounds very expensive.
It's not. It's
so if I call you up and I say, well, I need some help, what do I expect that I will have to pay?
Most of our services, except for parenting after separation, which is free, are available on a sliding scale, which basically means don't worry about it. You know, usually services work better when you pay something because you're more invested in it, but we'll figure out an amount with you that fits what you can realistically afford, and it's a lot cheaper than private practice. So.
I think, yes, important for people, a sliding scale, they may think of numbers that are high.
Yeah.
We're talking $10 to $20 as a starting point.
For counseling, it may be, you know, 30 or 40 or 50 or higher, depending if you're wealthy or not. But if you're average income, no, it's probably $30, $50. And that's dirt cheap compared with private practice, for example. Yet the services are equally as professional as what you can get in private practice, because we have a really well-picked crew, you know, quite an experienced crew who work closely together, as I said, and you know, we've chosen them very carefully from a diverse people, the people who've wanted to be in our team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, could you give us a case that you can remember where you thought you did a very uniquely good job?
Without giving away anything
That's
to
right.
reveal confidential information. Do you want to tackle that one, Pam?
There are so many times where you feel there's been some type of success in it, and it might, because people call back and they, for example, one person, I suggested that she could be appearing over telephone to have her case transferred from Vancouver to Victoria. And she didn't know that was an option. She called, she made arrangements, it got done, it was great. She called back to say thank you, that was wonderful. So that kind of situation is just a simple example. Mm-hmm. But there's times where we worked with the family for a fairly lengthy period of time, and that may involve various court appearances or helping them prepare for court. And I think the success is probably just in the people, even if things didn't go as well as they would have liked, they still appreciate the service and the people that provided it. Mm-hmm. And they felt that there was care, and that people were very invested in trying to help them have their best outcome.
Well, I know I had a case where one of your legal advocates was involved, and mm-hmm. it involved sitting through court with my client over an extended period of time.
That's right.
And I know that she really needed that support.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also talked to people who have come to you to get assistance in just filling out the forms. Mm-hmm. And I know that you don't do that, but you certainly can point them in the right direction. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We point them to whatever self-help is available. There are different web resources where people can get information about forms for various court proceedings, whether it's provincial or Supreme Court, and some of the instructions that go with that. We help, again, link them with where they can get initial consultations to check over some of the information, or ask questions, so that then they're able to fill out the paperwork more accurately as to what's required. A lot of work around financial statements that we can help with, and sometimes it's just people are not comfortable filling out paperwork that involves like financial income tax looking type paperwork.
Right.
We should mention too that we now collaborate with a financial planner in one of our programs. So people who are struggling to communicate about money and working through that as a marital issue can come to us and actually be referred to a financial planner, essentially to be able to see the numbers in front of them together and develop again a common language. What does this mean? And come to terms to essentially agree on what they're actually dealing with, which is a huge step for many people, just to be able to agree that these are the numbers we're seeing and this is what it actually means for us in broad terms. And that can be really important to being able to communicate what do we do with it. So I think that's really valuable, and we have the same financial planner and a workshop for people who are separating with children and the financial issues are a major issue. So that program is called Talking About Money and Relationships, and it's a relatively new one that we're very proud of.
And it has a specific 3-hour free session on finances after separation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't know that you had all this to offer, and
it's amazing. I mean, every day, literally every day, I sit in my office and I think, how can I be lucky enough to work in such a thriving, unique, wonderful place where all this is buzzing around me?
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you for both joining us today, and thank you for watching Island Justice with Roger Batchelor.
The proceeding was an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.